There are moments in life when something breaks, not outside of you, but within. A rupture so deep it leaves you breathless. Not because of a wound you can see, but because of a truth you never wanted to face. You trusted you guys. You believed in people who didn't believe in you. And when betrayal came, it didn't knock. Ill is shattered. But here's what they didn't expect. You didn't stay broken. The pain that was supposed to silence you, it sparked something ancient. A power that was always there, buried beneath your willingness to see the best in others, even when they showed you the worst. This is not a story of collapse. This is the moment your strength stepped out of hiding. Because betrayal didn't kill you, it introduced you to the version of yourself they were never ready to face. Betrayal is a catalyst, not a curse. Betrayal. It's one of the most disorienting human experiences. Not because it catches us by surprise, but because it often comes from those we trusted the most. When you hand someone the keys to your vulnerability, you never expect them to use those keys to walk out and lock the door behind them. You expect protection, not abandonment. You expect honesty, not deception. And when that expectation crumbles, it feels like the ground beneath you disappears too. But here's the truth most people never learn. Betrayal, while deeply painful, is not your ending. It's your awakening. It's not a curse sent to destroy you. It's a fire meant to burn away the illusions you held too tightly. It's a jolt that forces you to examine the foundation on which you've built your relationships, your self-worth, and even your direction in life. It's easy to see betrayal as the moment everything fell apart, but what if it was actually the moment everything finally got real? So much of life is layered in masks: people-pleasing, compromise, the need to be liked, the fear of being alone. You mold yourself to fit the expectations of others, often believing that love means self-sacrifice, that loyalty requires silence, that forgiveness means forgetting. But betrayal rips through those beliefs like a blade through paper. It doesn't ask for your permission. It simply exposes what was already broken beneath the surface. The pain is not meaningless. It's not random. It reveals what you couldn't or wouldn't see before. It shows you the imbalance, the unsided effort, the unhealthy attachments dressed up as commitment. It's like being snapped awake from a dream you didn't know you were dreaming. And yes, the awakening is harsh, but it's necessary, because what do you do after betrayal? You pause and you question everything you thought was certain. You sit in silence and search through the wreckage of your trust. And that's where you find something remarkable: your capacity to begin again. That first step after betrayal isn't glamorous. It's quiet, it's shaky, and it's real, and it belongs to you. And this is where growth begins, not in the comfort of peace, but in the chaos of broken expectations. You begin to realize that maybe the version of you who allowed so much, who tolerated too much, who ignored the signs, that version needed to be challenged. Not because you were weak, but because you were too generous with people who hadn't earned that kind of access to your heart. Betrayal doesn't just remove people from your life, it removes illusions. And illusions are dangerous. They keep you stuck. They convince you that if you just try harder, if you just give more, the situation will change. But betrayal says enough. It forces clarity. Suddenly, you see the dynamics for what they were, not what you hoped they would become. And that clarity is powerful. Because once you see things clearly, you can no longer pretend. You can no longer make excuses for others while abandoning yourself. You can no longer carry the weight of responsibility for relationships where the other person never lifted a finger. That's the hidden gift of betrayal. It reintroduces you to your boundaries. It teaches you that self-respect is not arrogance, that protecting your peace is not selfish, that love, real love, doesn't ask you to shrink or silence yourself. This is not about revenge. It's not about bitterness. It's about rising, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. You learn how to discern energy. You learn how to trust your instincts, the ones you may have silenced before. You learn to listen more deeply, to act more intentionally, and to walk away when something no longer aligns with your truth. Betrayal sharpens you. It refines your understanding of who you are, what you need, and what you will never settle for again. And perhaps the most profound shift, you stop seeking validation from others and begin to validate yourself. You stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking, what am I being called to become because of this? That's transformation. That's how betrayal becomes a catalyst, not a curse. Because you are not the same person anymore. You're more aware, more grounded, more deliberate in who you allow into your sacred space. And that version of you, the one forged in the fire of disappointment and dishonesty, that version doesn't chase people anymore. That version walks with clarity, with conviction, and with calm strength. So no, betrayal didn't destroy you. It removed the veil. It shattered the shell. And in doing so, it revealed the depth of your power, the kind that can't be taken, only discovered. The shattering of trust reveals the depth of self. When trust breaks, it doesn't just change how you see others, it changes how you see yourself. There is a moment after the betrayal where the silence becomes louder than the betrayal itself. Not because of what was done, but because of what it forces you to confront. You sit with questions you never imagined you'd have to ask. Questions like, was I not enough? How? Did I not see it? What part of me ignored the signs? This is the silent collapse that betrayal brings. Not just the collapse of the relationship or the friendship or the connection, but the collapse of the version of you that was built around someone else's words, promises, and approval. The version of you that molded itself to keep the peace, that gave the benefit of the doubt, that believed loyalty was a virtue, even when it went unreciprocated. And when that trust is shattered, you're left standing in the ruins of the identity you wore while loving someone who wasn't ready to hold that love with care. But make no mistake, this collapse, while painful, is not the end. It is the doorway to depth, because what emerges from that brokenness is something far more real than what existed before. In the aftermath, you start asking deeper questions, not just about them, but about yourself. You begin to see how much of your value had been attached to being needed, to being chosen, to being understood. You notice how much of your energy had been tied up in proving your worth to people who only saw a fraction of your depth. And suddenly it clicks. You weren't just betrayed by someone else. You had also betrayed parts of yourself by staying too long in places that drained you, by staying silent when you should have spoken, by shrinking when you should have stood tall. That's the hard truth. But it's also the truth that frees you. Because now you're no longer in the fog. You're no longer trying to fit into a space that was never built to hold the full weight of who you are. You begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself that were lost trying to keep others comfortable. The self that questioned everything, even your own instincts. The self that gave endlessly, hoping the love you gave would one day be returned. That self begins to rise, and it rises with clarity. You begin to separate what was real from what was imagined. You see how much of your identity had become entangled in someone else's inability to show up with integrity. And once you see that, you can't go back. You won't allow yourself to carry the same emotional debt in future connections. The pain, as unbearable as it once felt, becomes a teacher. It teaches you that your intuition wasn't wrong, you just silenced it. It teaches you that being kind doesn't mean being blind. And most importantly, it teaches you that your worth was never something to be negotiated. Now, you begin the work of rebuilding, but not in the way people often describe it. You don't rebuild to prove something to anyone. You rebuild to reconnect with what's always been true inside of you. You begin to build boundaries, not walls. You learn to speak with honesty, not fear. You learn that trusting others again doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you trust yourself more this time around. And here's the beautiful paradox. The breaking of trust is what teaches you how to truly trust yourself. Before, you may have second-guessed your instincts. You may have tolerated behaviors that didn't align with your values. You may have poured out your energy hoping it would make the connection more secure. But now, you listen more closely. You pause before you give. You discern with care. Not because you're guarded, but because you're grounded. You no longer place your entire emotional world into someone else's hands. You learn how to hold it yourself. And from that place, your connections begin to change. As you start attracting people who meet you where you are, not where they wish you would stay. You begin speaking from a place of truth, not from a place of fear. You no longer beg to be seen because you've seen yourself. That's what betrayal reveals, the depth that was always there, the strength, the clarity, the wisdom. You didn't lose yourself in the betrayal. You found the parts of you that were hidden beneath the desire to belong. You are not defined by what was broken. You are defined by what you chose to rebuild from it. And now, what you build will be rooted in truth, not illusion. The authenticity, not performance. So when trust is shattered, don't rush to cover the cracks. Sit with them, study them, because within those cracks lives a version of you that is deeper, truer, and far more powerful than the one who came before. Pain clarifies purpose. Pain has a way of bringing life into focus. When everything is comfortable, when your world is predictable, you don't always question where you're headed. You move on autopilot. You say yes when you should say no. You stay quiet when something inside you screams to speak. You get caught in patterns not because you're weak, but because comfort numbs urgency. It makes stagnation feel safe. But pain doesn't let you stay numb. It crashes in. It interrupts. It brings with it an undeniable awareness that something has to change. Whether it comes through betrayal, loss, disappointment, or the slow erosion of your spirit, pain is not just a signal that something hurts, it's a signal that something matters. And when it hits, it doesn't just hurt emotionally, it forces you to reevaluate what you've been doing with your time, your energy, your heart. It asks you, what have you been investing in that no longer invests in you? What have you been tolerating that no longer aligns with your truth? These are not comfortable questions. They require honesty. They require facing parts of yourself that you might have ignored or excused, but they also open the door to clarity. Deep, unshakable clarity about what you're here for and who you're becoming. Pain strips away the distractions. It doesn't care about how others see you. It doesn't care about appearances. In the midst of suffering, there's no more pretending. You're left with your raw, unfiltered self. And that's where the real work begins. It's in the quiet hours, when no one else is watching, that you start piecing together a new understanding. You begin to ask better questions. Not, why is this happening to me? But, what is this trying to teach me? Not, how do I get back to who I was, but, who am I now meant to become? Purpose is often born in the place where you were once most broken. Because pain reveals what you can no longer ignore. It exposes the disconnect between your values and your choices. Maybe you've been living a life that looks good on the outside but feels empty on the inside. Maybe you've poured yourself into relationships, jobs, or identities that gave you temporary security but no lasting fulfillment. Pain highlights those imbalances with stunning clarity. And in that moment of awareness, you face a decision. You can numb the pain, run from it, distract yourself until the feeling fades, or you can lean in. You can listen. You can let it refine you. Because pain, when approached with courage, doesn't just destroy, it reconstructs. It peels away what's no longer real so that what's essential can finally emerge. You start to realize what truly matters. You see the value in things you once overlooked. Peace of mind, integrity, time, inner alignment. You stop chasing validation from people who never truly saw you. You stop performing for approval that never satisfied you. Instead, you begin living in alignment with your deepest values. And that's where purpose comes alive. Purpose is not just about doing something big or dramatic. It's about living truthfully. It's about making decisions that reflect who you are, not who others expect you to be. It's about using what you've been through to guide how you show up in the world now. Every painful experience becomes a lens. Through it, you see with more precision. You become more selective with your time, more intentional with your energy, more discerning with your relationships. You recognize what drains you and what nourishes you. You stop trying to fix others and start building yourself. Pain teaches you that not everything deserves your access, that not everyone can walk with you into your next chapter, that healing sometimes requires separation, stillness, solitude, but out of that solitude comes direction. You're no longer motivated by fear or the need to please. You're driven by clarity. You find yourself saying no more often, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You walk away from environments that stifle you, not because you're angry, but because you've outgrown them. You stop apologizing for needing space, rest, honesty, because you've realized your well thin is not a luxury, it's a responsibility. That's the shift. Pain, when you face it instead of fleeing from it, becomes a compass. It doesn't just tell you where not to go, it shows you where you must go. It reconnects you with your inner voice, your forgotten dreams, your unspoken truth. And it asks you to live with courage, not because life will be easy, but because your path is now illuminated by something deeper than convenience. You may not have chosen the pain, but you can choose what it creates in you. Let it build your character. Let it deepen your compassion. Let it raise your standards. And above all, let it point you back to yourself, not the version you once were, but the version you were always meant to become. That is the power of pain. It clarifies purpose in a way nothing else can. Your survival is evidence of unseen strength. There are moments in life where you don't think you'll make it through. Moments when the silence becomes louder than the noise. When you lie awake, not because you're restless, but because something inside you has been shaken so deeply, you can't find steady ground. The betrayal, the loss, the abandonment, it doesn't just affect your mind. It reaches into your soul and questions everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and truth. And yet, here you are, maybe bruised, maybe quieter, but still here. What does that say about you? It says more than you've probably ever given yourself credit for. Because survival isn't just a word, it's a testament. It's living proof that even when life cracked you wide open, even when everything familiar turned unfamiliar, you didn't give in to the darkness. You didn't disappear into your pain. You walked through it, however slowly, however shakily, and you're still standing. That's not weakness. That's resilience in its most honest form. We often don't recognize strength while we're in survival mode. That's because survival doesn't always look heroic. It's not always bold or loud or impressive to the outside world. Sometimes it looks like brushing your hair when you don't feel like moving. Sometimes it's showing up to work with a broken heart. Sometimes it's choosing not to call someone who hurt you because you're honoring your healing instead of your impulse. These are not small things. These are quiet victories. Survival means something hurt you, but it didn't get the final say. You kept going. You adapted. You rebuilt yourself out of fragments you never imagined having to pick up. You faced mornings that felt like mountains. You walked into rooms where your trust had once been shattered, and you carried yourself with grace anyway. That kind of strength isn't always praised. It's not always noticed, but it matters more than most people will ever know. Because real strength isn't about being untouched by pain. It's about becoming wiser because of it. It's about choosing growth even when bitterness would be easier. It's about deciding again and again that you are worth protecting, nurturing, and showing up for. Every person who has ever walked through deep emotional suffering has faced this quiet battle, the pull to shut down versus the courage to remain open, to love again, to trust again, to hope again. It's a war fought in silence. But every time you chose light over numbness, truth over denial, forward motion over self-pity, you were building a new version of yourself, one that wasn't shaped by what happened to you, but by how you responded to it. So take a moment to acknowledge that. You survived not just an event, but a transformation. You walked through a kind of fire that burned away illusions attachments, and old identities. And what's left, what remains, is something more grounded, more thoughtful, and more real than what existed before. This isn't to say that healing makes you invincible. There are still moments of grief. There are still days when memories sting. But the fact that you're feeling it all, that you didn't shut yourself off completely, is strength. You are not fragile just because you're still affected. You are human. And your capacity to feel deeply is not a weakness. It's a gift. It's part of what makes your strength so unique. Because it's not armored. It's alive. There is a quiet power in saying, I've been through things I never asked for, but I'm still choosing to become better because of them. That decision doesn't happen once, it happens every day. In how you speak to yourself, in what you allow and what you no longer tolerate, and how you protect your peace and prioritize your well-being. You're not the same person you were before the pain, and that's the point. This survival isn't just about making it out alive. It's about who you became in the process, the wisdom you gained, the discernment you sharpened, the strength that now lives in your silence, in your stillness, in your presence. You didn't just survive, you evolved. You now carry a strength that doesn't shout to be seen because it's not performative. It's embodied. It's in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you no longer beg for love or chase after people who once made you feel small. This strength was earned. It was formed in the depths of your hardest days. It was shaped not by what others saw, but by what you endured when no one was watching. So hold your head high, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you know what it costs you to be here. Your survival is not a random outcome. It's a message, a reflection of your inner power. A declaration that the pain did not win, that you did. Revenge is not power, mastery is. When you've been wronged, deeply, personally, unjustly, there's a fire that rises in you. It's the kind of fire that comes from betrayal, from being misunderstood, from having your loyalty treated like it was disposable. It burns hot and fast. And in that heat, the mind whispers one word again and again. Revenge. You want to be seen. You want the truth to come out. You want those who hurt you to feel even a fraction of what you endured. It's a natural response. It's human to want justice, to want to balance the scales. But here's the difficult truth. Revenge may feel satisfying in the short term, but it never truly gives you back what was taken. It doesn't restore your peace. It doesn't rebuild your character. And it certainly doesn't heal your wounds. Because revenge is reactive. It's based on their actions, not your values. And that's not power. That's still giving them control. True power is not about getting even. It's about rising above the level of the very behavior that broke you. It's about becoming so steady, so self-aware, so grounded in your purpose that nothing they do can unseat your worth. And this doesn't mean you let people walk over you. It doesn't mean you excuse what was done or stay silent in the face of harm. It means you don't let your identity be reduced to a reaction. You don't let your life become a mirror of someone else's brokenness. There's a difference between strength and impulse. Revenge is impulse. Mastery is strength. And mastery says, I don't need to destroy you to rebuild me. Mastery says, I will grow in front of your absence, not shrink because of it. Mastery chooses discipline over drama, peace over noise, and legacy over petty satisfaction. That is power. And here's the thing, they may never apologize. They may never admit what they did. They may never see the full weight of the pain they caused. But you are not waiting for that. Because when you begin to master yourself, your reactions, your emotions, your energy, you realize that closure doesn't come from them. It comes from within. It comes the moment you decide your life is too valuable to be dictated by someone else's shortcomings. You take back your time, and you take back your focus. You take back your dignity. And in doing so, you do something far more powerful than revenge. You evolve. You begin investing in the version of you that isn't trapped in the past. You begin creating a future so aligned with truth, clarity, and purpose that the betrayal becomes a turning point, not a prison. You choose to channel the pain, not recycle it. Mastery means transforming the wound into wisdom. It means standing in the storm and saying, "This will not break me, it will build me." And you keep showing up, not for them, but for yourself. This is not weakness. It's the highest form of strength, because it takes far more courage to stay rooted in your integrity than to stoop to vengeance. Ask yourself, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Do you want to be remembered as someone who lost themselves chasing after those who didn't value them? Or as someone who turned their pain into a platform, their scars into strength, their silence into strategy? Every great transformation comes with a moment of choice. And in that moment you decide, will you let what they did shape you, or will you let what you do next define you? You don't need to retaliate to prove your strength. Your healing is the proof. Your growth is the proof. Your ability to walk away without turning back, that is the loudest statement you'll ever make. Because while they stayed the same, you evolved. While they clung to old patterns, you rewrote your story. While they avoided growth, you embodied it. You became the very person they didn't expect you to become. And that's something revenge could never give you, because revenge is about them. Mastery is about you. So next time the urge to get even comes up, pause, take a breath, and remember, you're not here to match someone else's dysfunction. You're here to master your mission. Power isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you never needed their validation in the first place. That's what true mastery is. That disciplined, unshakable,